Yes, so there are a number of challenges really affecting government, business, the community at large, I suppose, at this point in time around the world. The first trend that I think is really important is the emergence really of deeply interconnected global economies. I mean, you know how we used to just think about national economies. As we've seen in the global financial crisis, now economies around the world are totally interdependent and interconnected, and you can't really solve a problem any longer just at a national level. So that's a really important one. The next trend that I think really has a big impact on economic growth and a whole range of other issues is in fact the shift of power from Western wealthy countries to Eastern emerging countries. And what we're really seeing there is the shift really of a whole range of things. I mean, obviously economic opportunity in Asia, for example, at the moment is very, very significant. We are seeing the growth of whole new business models in those markets. And we're really seeing, I suppose, the shift of geopolitical power from the West to the East. We are also seeing, of course, the impact of mass communications through technology. They're using that connectivity to build political alliances. They're using it to influence government decisions. They're using it to advocate for particular issues that they feel passionate about. And that can now be done not just any longer at a local interest group level, but really becomes global very, very quickly, and therefore has a very significant impact. We also know that more and more technology will provide robots, for example, artificial intelligence. We know by 2020 there will be 50 billion devices that communicate with each other without any human interference or any human involvement. And of course, all of that represents a whole range of opportunities, but also threats. Another trend that I think is really important is really all about growth. It's about growth of population on the planet. It's about aging populations, in particular in Western countries and China. It's about young populations in Africa, India, the Middle East, who all will need jobs, education, opportunity. And, you know, we'll look around the world for those opportunities and not just any longer just in a local context. It's about big cities. I mean, cities as a result of urbanization are growing massively. I mean, you know, we used to think a big city had maybe 8 million people. Now we have mega cities, cities that have more than 20 to 25 million people, and that trend will continue. And then obviously that has an impact on the environment, and we all know that really an important trend to be aware of in government, but also as a citizen on the planet, is the impact of changes in our climate. We know that, for example, some of the climate change related events that have taken place in the US just in the last couple of years each cost about $1 billion to deal with the aftermath of those events. So they have a big impact on how we think about government budgets, for example. And then finally, there's an important trend, which is the trend of whole new technologies, in particular in the biotech, nanotech, and other sectors, which are really very much transforming how we will provide, for example, health services or clinical services more broadly. And they also, of course, have the capacity for human beings to control evolution, which is an extraordinary development when it occurs, and will of course require a whole lot of rethinking around moral, ethical, regulatory, IP, HR, you name it, issues. So governments, of course, will have a major role to play. Yes, it's important for the public sector to respond to these new challenges. I think what it requires is leadership. It requires the public service, and in particular senior public servants, to play a strong role, to make sure, for example, that someone thinks about the long term, not just about short-term political decision-making, but also considers the long-term implications, sometimes the unintended consequences. I think that senior public sector leaders more than ever have a role to play in terms of painting the long-term picture for government and for citizens, because we need to, in actual fact, prepare for being ready, I suppose, for the impact that many of these changes that I've described will have, no matter where you are. I mean, they will have an impact, you know, whether you're sitting somewhere locally or whether you have a national picture or an international picture. So I think that's very, very important. What we also need from senior public sector leaders is really to adopt a more international or global mindset. I mean, some governments around the world are now recruiting into their public services only people who have some understanding of international insights or who come with a big picture or global mindset. And why is that important? Because, first of all, because of the interconnectivity of everything, but also, of course, because most problems that governments are dealing with have already been thought about somewhere else. So really learning from each other, looking across the world for how others have addressed similar issues is very, very important. And then, of course, the other issue that I think is really important is diversity of thought at decision-making tables. In EY, we are reviewing on an annual basis, for example, how many women are leading government departments across the G20 countries. And we are finding that, in fact, those numbers are not what one might expect after 40 years of equal employment opportunity. But it's no longer about inequality. This is actually about getting the best, most diverse thinking to the decision-making table, so we find new solutions to some of these very difficult and complex problems. Well, the public service is pretty interesting pretty much everywhere, because what we have is obviously lots of women working as public sector leaders, or no, working in the public service. But what we're not seeing is the numbers of women leading government agencies, for example, increasing to the degree that really is required. So, I mean, it takes in government what it takes in business. It takes leadership, so that means directors general, permanent secretaries, departmental heads really need to champion the cause of women moving, in particular, from middle management to senior management. It's absolutely essential. So that leadership from the top down has to be there. The other thing that has to be there is, of course, women who are in senior roles acting as role models and making sure that there is a path for women to follow through and, you know, break through, I suppose, some of the barriers that definitely are there. A third issue is really the issue of being aware of unconscious bias. I mean, we all have ideas about what success looks like or what the right candidate for a role looks like. But, you know, being aware that our ideas are, of course, influenced by the way we see men or women, or by the way we've been socialized into thinking about those issues, and being aware that that has an impact on how we might make choices when we appoint people or employ people is really important. And then I would say the fourth point is really about women themselves. I mean, you know, women have to put themselves forward and say, okay, well, I actually have the ambition to be in a senior leadership role, and connect with the right people so they get supported and mentored and championed through the system.